Welcome to the 3 of 7 podcast. I don't know if I'll edit any of that front stuff. We don't do a lot of editing around here, so I don't know if I'll edit all that out or not. But welcome to the 3 of 7 podcast, where the old bull is still winning at CrossFit. Yesterday, Blake got beat again.
Yeah, I was telling Chili about how you was over there just literally just taking 10-second breaks between each burpee box jump over, not struggling against yourself, doing the best you can.
How'd y'all's run go this morning?
Good. Yeah, and if you miss one more time, I'm going to counsel you.
Well, look, man.
Go ahead. No, give me the excuse.
I'm not even getting into it today.
No, but you were going to, and he's got every legitimate excuse in the world, but that's why you get 3 times. You get 3 times.
Okay.
Then you're getting counseled.
Chili's being gracious with you.
Whatever, man. Hey, Stacie, how you doing today?
Hello.
Look, pull that thing on back there to you. That way you ain't got to lean forward.
Told you.
Okay.
Look,
Oh, I can't.
look at that.
Oh, magic.
Look at that, son.
Ooh, now I can recline and unwind.
You just move that thing over which way you want to move it. Thank you for coming out here. It's a wonderful day to record a podcast, right?
Yeah.
It really is. With a good cup of coffee.
Yeah. There's not a whole lot else that you can really get into outside today. We're getting hit with kind of our first little bout of winter weather down here in Georgia is what I would call it.
Terrible.
Coming.
Yeah, it's coming. Does it get muddy around the farm during the winter?
Oh, yes. Yes. I did the walk of shame several times last year, getting the tractor stuck.
Oh, yeah, I'll bet.
Kubota stuck. And having to call in for some reinforcements. That's not a call you want to make.
Well, when you especially I imagine when you got cows.
Yes.
Cows can make a muddy mess. Chickens can make a muddy mess.
Mm-hmm.
And pigs can too.
You got pigs too?
I have 2 potbelly pigs, but they're on a short list here. They're not
really?
earning their keep around the farm. I'll just say that.
Oh, man.
I am making some plans for them.
I heard that, man.
But I don't know how much meat you can really get from a potbelly pig. So, and I just don't. They're just right now. They're just for amusement. It's really fun. But they, they're rooters, and they eat grubs and worms, and so they have just tore up our yard and my garden, and they have messed up all my fences. So they're costing me money now. Yeah, they're not being good farm guests.
Now, are these potbelly pigs free ranging?
They are free ranging.
Grass-fed pork.
What the heck? I didn't know you could free range a pig. I thought that they would go wild. These just are like pets, though.
Well, I believe these have gone wild.
But they stay around the house.
Yeah, they come back. I mean, they come back to this little pen we have every night. They find their way back. That's why they have to be rehomed, because the little pen they're in is close to my garden, and so they have made a little hole for themselves where they escape. So they have decided themselves they want to be free range. They've gone rogue. So it's time to rein this in. The potbelly pigs have taken over for too long.
Well, I think if they had offspring, then they would be feral, right?
Yeah. And honestly, so my brother, he does a lot of hunting on the property, and we have about 50 acres of mountain land that we have in a conservation easement. And so a lot of that's just so full of beautiful wildlife. And so we get to observe this wildlife camera. And so we last fall had a mama bear, black bear, coming through, which it was beautiful to watch her. And she had 2 cubs with her. And then this season, we have some wild boars. But those are kind of scary, honestly, because they like to, they'll come down with the cattle, and sometimes they'll mess with like the corral and like where we keep the hay rings and stuff. And they're not afraid. They're not afraid to come at you.
Do you need somebody to take care of them wild hogs over there?
Well, her brother hunts.
If you know a man,
We got
send
some
him my way.
We got some thermal optic we can shoot them at night with if you need us to.
Well, I mean, that's what the game warden was like. There's a lot of people that have raised them for hunting purposes. So there is like an overpopulation problem with wild hogs for sure.
I got a pump action shotgun. Took that on the river.
Chili has been known to wield the hog buster. That's wild though, because I'm just over the ridge from you.
Yeah.
Literally. Well, I think you're on what would you be like on? What would that be? The north side of Taylor's Ridge.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
So like on the Sloppy Floyd's side over there.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. My property actually corners up to National Forestry land, and I can get on the Pinhoti from my farm.
Okay. I know right where you're at then.
Beautiful bridge there.
So as the crow flies, I'm only
just a hop, skip, and a holler.
I bet I'm not from the top of Sims Mountain over to where you're at. Probably ain't 2 or 3 miles in a straight line, Yeah. But hogs, man.
Well, I'll tell you why them pigs of hers have went rogue, because I seen when she fed them goats wasn't going to let them hogs get no kind of feed, so they don't have no choice but to go wild, because they'd come over there and them goats would butt them, and them hogs would go to squeal and just
It's like a bad roommate situation. So we got the pigs because one of our daughters is obsessed with pigs. And so she wrote me this sweet little note, like, Mama, the only thing I want on the farm is a pig. So how can I say no to that? So I got these pigs from a friend, and I have these goats that I milk. They're dwarfs. They're Nigerian dwarf goats, and they are like OCD. Like, they like their space to be clean, and they have this nice little pen. And so I moved the pigs in with the goats, and so they were like, "What in the world? You have ruined our lives." So the goats really do go after the pigs. It's comical. It's the funny farm out there, pretty much.
Yeah.
Sounds like a blast, man. Well, I guess we should talk about what is unique about Stacie. Stacie Marshall's her name. She's the owner of Mountain Mama Farms.
I was really hoping y'all would serenade me like you did the Willie song. I was hoping for that.
Chad can probably do that.
Well, I'm sung out today. I'm sung out today.
I was waiting for the John Denver song.
I thought he was going to be singing some Seven Bridges Road.
Son, I need to sing some blues, man. I tell you, this mess with the dog is well, that's for another podcast. It's something else. But that's life, I mean, the only thing I did have a thought today, I was thinking, has anybody else ever thought that the fact that we are so like averse to death and dying, and death is such an ugly, nasty thing for a human. If you see another human die, it's just ugly, nasty, and we're so like, it's so hurtful, death is. And has anybody ever thought that actually is an indicator that we were meant for a place where we would live eternally? I don't know. I'm just thinking, like, the fact that we are so opposed to death, and it is so ugly and hurtful to us, our hearts, not our own death, but when we see others die and things like that, that to me is evidence that we are actually meant and created to live eternally, where we don't experience that, right? And that's why it's so hurtful to us, so.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a sign that death is not of God, or else we would enjoy it, right?
Yeah,
God didn't create death. He didn't create that. That wasn't part of his plan.
It's unnatural.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is really in light of the way we and all of this was meant to be. Death is an unnatural part of the equation. And I think that's why we're so opposed to it, because it forces us into this situation that's unnatural to what we were actually created, the existence we were created for in the very beginning. Because if it was a natural part of our existence, you would just think somebody or something dies and you're just like, oh, that's just part of it. It's just, I don't know, man. I'm going through all these.
We're created to live, not die.
Crazy thoughts. Yeah.
And I think also, if I could just speak to that, like that's something about being back on the farm and having such a direct connection to God's creation that just the unfolding of the redemption process is just so much in the rhythms of the life cycle of the farm, like caring for an animal and, feeling joy and celebration when there's life on the farm, but also there's death too. There's the both and. So, I think we've somehow got disjointed even from our own reality, mortality. And you think about how our ancestors lived 100 years ago. They were producing their own food, they were butchering their own animals, and they had such an awareness of the sacrifice that was required to sustain their lives, the labor that went into actually putting food on the table. And so, I've been really grateful, and it's been a very transformative experience for me with just the Lord to be brought back to the land in that way, to be reminded of that and those rhythms.
I think that's true. That's 100%. We've become totally disconnected to that cycle. And I think also another thing, back in, you say just 100 years ago, people were also burying their own family members. Like the whole death process in current culture is astounding to me. It's a business. Someone dies, they whisk the body away. You never see them again until they're boxed up nice and pretty and preserved in their casket. Then it goes away and goes into the ground, and it's just like, man, it's very, very hands-off and disconnected for many reasons. One, because society turns everything into a business, and everybody wants a cut. You can't even freaking die for free. You probably get taxed when you die. You can't
family
even,
does.
Yeah, you can't even die anymore. We're totally disconnected from it. But I think a lot about death. Death doesn't scare me. It doesn't bother me in a sense that I'm not opposed to talking about how I feel about it and how ugly it is and how it is part of our reality. But I guess the difference in the thoughts that I'm having right now is that reality and how we feel and interact with it actually can point us back to the fact that we were created for an eternal existence.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and we don't have any control over it, too. I think that's another thing that makes it a little bit different. And we don't really have control over our life. I mean, to an extent you do. You have this false sense of control, but death you don't. Like when death comes knocking, it don't matter to you. And it's permanent. There's no going back from it unless you're Jesus. And you're not.
A lot of people mistake me for Jesus, Stacie. A lot of times I'll say something or do something and I'll have people on social media that are judgmental, if you would want to say, very, very happy when they see the opportunity to point out hypocrisy in a Christian. Very, very happy when they see that. And so I'll do something or say something, and somebody will say, oh, yeah, just like Jesus would have done, right? And I just have to remind the world every now and then, I'm not Jesus. I'm sorry. I'm not Jesus.
Well, that's a good thing, right?
I'm just a dude.
Why do people want to jump on the hypocrisy of Christians? I've actually, maybe that's just shifted in my mind, but I'm actually thankful for that because that means we're being held to a high standard. And it gives us a repeated opportunity to point back to why we are all hypocrites because we can't live up to the perfect standard that was set. So I actually think it's a good thing because we're not the story that we proclaim isn't that once we're saved, then we'll start living perfect. We don't claim that. I think a lot of people get that twisted. So the fact that we strive to live differently, but we're still going to fail is actually, it's just more evidence of what we're talking about. So I think it's good when we get pointed out as hypocrites and you can just keep pointing people back to, away from yourself, back to Jesus. So
amen, man. Have you guys watched that TV series called Chosen?
I've heard about
I've
it.
watched a couple of
Okay.
them.
Some people can't get into it. I got into it. And there's this scene where Mary Magdalene, Jesus essentially, casts all these demons out of her, and she becomes part of the group that follows him around during his ministry. And so Mary, in this Chosen series, she actually backslides and she goes back to her old life for a few days, and then she comes back into the presence of Jesus. And she's really just ashamed just that she did that. And in the scene, it just was so powerful to me because Jesus looks at her in the scene. Now everything in Chosen is not biblical, and they have that disclaimer on there. A lot of this is we portray based off of how we think it actually was then, historically, and expounding on what is in the Bible. And Jesus looks at her and says, "Did you really think that after I saved you that you would never sin again? Like, did you think that?" And Mary says, I just don't know what to say. And Jesus looks back at her and says, "Well, I don't require much." And I just thought, man, he doesn't. He doesn't require some big apology and he's offering you a free gift. And he don't require much from you. Mm-hmm. He just wants you to say, "I trust in you, Jesus, forgive me."
Yep.
And I just thought, dang, he doesn't require much.
Yeah.
Thank God he doesn't require much from us, fallible humans.
Not that we could give him much if he did.
Yeah,
require.
exactly.
He doesn't require anything from us because he gave it all.
Yeah. It was impactful to me. I highly recommend that series if you guys haven't watched it. If you can get into it, I thought it was good. Stacie, where in the world did Mountain Mama Farms start for you?
Oh, well, I am a 5th generation farmer. I grew up on a 300-acre farm in the foothills of northwest Georgia, where we're at. And, my grandparents were on one end of the farm. My mom and dad and brother and I were on the other end of the farm. And, my days were spent back and forth between my mama and papa's house. And, farming was just like the background music of my life. I was always making jams and jellies with mama, or papa had me out, helping with the cattle if a baby cow was born, or feeding the cattle with him. And so it was just such the rhythm of my life. And so I think that, I kind of, I guess like all of us, we have to find our way. But I moved off to college and met this cute, handsome little guy, and got married and had 3 kiddos. And just for a lot of years, we lived in Atlanta, and we're happy in our careers there. And then we had kind of a family crisis that kind of played out. And my dad was an only child, and my grandparents were getting in years where it was harder for them to be out on the farm and do as much. And so my husband and I, everybody in our friend group in Atlanta thought we were crazy to quit our jobs and move back to the country. But we just, we knew we had an opportunity to come and love on my family and serve them and in this season of life that my family was in. And so, unbeknownst to me, I, had no idea what the Lord had, what the Lord was about to bring me through. But I moved back home, to be with my people. And when my youngest daughter was 1 year old, she just turned a year old, my mother, who was 60, discovered she had pancreatic cancer, and she was gone in 6 weeks. And so she was actually taking care of my grandparents as well. And my grandparents actually passed away. My mom's mom, my nanny, and my pawpaw 5 months after my mom. So I picked out 3 coffins in 5 months. And that was a deep season of grief. I entered into a deep season of grief where, these people that always been in my life and taught me how to live off the land, they were gone. I mean, it just felt like, very quickly they were gone.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that, what the Bible says, like, we grieve with those that have hope. And so I knew there was this journey that I was called to grieve. And I was called to grieve because I had been loved deeply, and I did love deeply. And so, man, I was scared of grief. I didn't know what it was going to do to me. I didn't know what the depression of grief, because that's one of the stages. I was 33 years old. And I'm 41 now. And so, this was 8 years ago. So yeah, I think I just, I knew that I needed to walk the valley. And I knew if I ever wanted to experience great joy again, that I had to allow myself to experience pain and experience the loss. And so just everything changed really quickly because, those were the people that, cooked the holiday dinners. And all of a sudden it was like, okay, it's my responsibility to do that. And, then who's going to help Daddy with the hay, and just, I think my brother and I both, were entering in and being called forth into this new place in our family, that those people that it's almost like my grandparents and even my mom, like losing a parent specifically. It's like those are almost like I hate to say like almost like a barrier between you and heaven in a way. It's almost like those are the people that like, like they're going to go before you most likely.
Yeah.
But, and so there's always this like buffer almost like and so there was something honestly just about them being, in the presence with the Lord that was, incredibly, I was incredibly, thankful for that. But also there was the grief and the longing of knowing like, they were not here. They're not here. And so I was in ministry working alongside of my husband, and we were dorm parents in a college ministry and lived with students. And, I loved that work, but I was still holding this part of me that was longing to be back on this piece of land. And honestly, it wasn't just, me being aware that like there's this perfect place for all of us to be. It was more this just like calling from the Lord. Like I have something I want you to continue here. This is part of your family's legacy. And I have healing for you there. I have healing for others there. And you need to go. You need to go back home. And so my husband and I and our 3 girls, one of the last things my pawpaw said to me was, take care of this place. And raise those babies up in that house. And so, I opened the door to that old farmhouse, and my grandparents' toothbrushes were still in the bathroom, and their, pajamas and slippers were, still on their bed. And, I had to put my hands and touch every single thing that they owned. And, process through it, and process through their life. And so I started this journey of going back home. And, it was crazy because it was like I'd be, cleaning out a sock drawer and, I'd find a love note that they had wrote to each other, when my papa was in the service. So it was just like constantly just like revisiting, grief and processing, their belongings. And so, so Mountain Mama Farms is located on the Scoggins Heritage Farm, which is, that my maiden name is Scoggins. It's one of the first white settlers to come here, from Ireland, about 200 years ago. And so when my great-great-great-great-great-grandfather came here, he was able to get land through the Cherokee Lottery, through the government. And so I always knew these factors in the story, but discovered and entered into the story in a different way when it became mine. So that's kind of how Mountain Mama Farms came to be. From the John Denver song, "Country Roads Take Me Home to the Place I Belong."
And that's been pretty recent, right? Like, just it's been a couple years or something
we moved into the house. We moved out of the dorm during COVID, during the quarantine, like that week in March where it all hit. Mm-hmm. And I tell you what, it was, I know quarantining for different people meant different things in their lives, but man, it was a good place for me because my husband was not in work and we were with our kids every day and we dove in. We were, and even just like, okay, if like, we're not going to go hungry here. We've got, I'm going to have to like remember, it was like relearning. It was crazy, like pulling stuff out of the barn, like my mama's canner, and she'd saved like every single jar and Cool Whip container she had ever used. She saved, and then Papa, bless his heart, he was a Marine. And so, he was ready. There were 19 shotguns that we found stowed in the house. So, I have to be real careful because I'd be like, cleaning out the kitchen cabinet and there's a shotgun there. And, there's there's one under the mattress. There's one in the couch. So that was a journey. They were all antiques too, that all guns that, had been in the family for, passed down for generation. And so anyways, we just were there and, finding our place in that little, farm.
When you just, and beautiful story, by the way, I guess I should ask first, this history of your family, one thing, I'm very jealous of the history that you have and the relationship that you have with your heritage, your grandparents, great grandparents. That is a wonderful, wonderful gift in life to have that type of relationship with that part of your past. I don't have that, frankly. Was that passed down orally, or is this written? Is this looking back through records, or how did you develop this? How did this come to be? Your relationship with your ancestry and the history of your family and the farm, for that matter.
Yeah. So, it was mostly orally. Farm families, they're full of good storytellers, as a lot of people are here in the South. So our evenings were spent on the front porch just talking. I spent a lot of evenings on my mama and papa's porch. I spent a lot of evenings on my neighbor's porch growing up. So I think I learned a lot of stories about my family and about the community. And, I do think it's really rare. I think there's also something that is unique about this story is this little farming community had several families that remained there, for generations. So there was this deep, deep, deep knowing your neighbor. Like,
yeah.
I mean, really knowing your neighbor. And I mean, honestly, in a quirky way, like, I think this was a beautiful picture of what it looks like to bear in love. We bear each other's burdens, but like you knew each other's oddities. You knew the crazy things about it. I mean, you couldn't avoid not being known, living that way. And you were dependent on one another because, everybody was trying to just keep their farm going. And I mean, as you know, farming is not a very lucrative profession. And so most of the time we didn't have money growing up to hire people to help. And so we did it as a family, or we bartered with neighbors. So it was like, okay, you help us with your hay. I'll come over on Saturday and I'll help you with your, we would switch out. And so even through that interaction, it was like you learned stories, from other people's families as well.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome, man. Wow. That's the way community and also economy. It's the only logical way for it to work in my mind. And it's funny to think how we're not that far removed from it as far as time is concerned. The distance we've moved away from it in such a short amount of time is astounding.
You know how quick we could get back to it, though? Snap of a finger.
Well, it wouldn't take long because it would be either survive or return to that manner of community and economy. That would be it. When all these, different processes and stuff all eventually goes away. That's pretty cool. I have to ask too, I guess you kind of answered this, but when you left and went to school and you and your husband met and were married and living in Atlanta, I mean, there had to have been some significant tension revolving around you coming back on behalf of your family. And I can only imagine the calling you were feeling must have had to have been overwhelmingly strong and almost impossible to ignore, because that's a big shift. I mean, did you ever think you would wind up back on the farm? Did you have that intuition all along, or?
No, I didn't. And actually, that was like a very pivotal conversation that my husband and I had in our engagement. He said that the Lord might call us to Africa. He might call us, to live all over the country, but I don't think he'll ever call us to Gore, Georgia. Like, I just don't see that in our path. And if, it was one of those like defining the relationship talks. It was like, I know how much this means to you. And, obviously I was like, well, I feel called to marry you, and I want to follow that. And so, in the moment, it felt like something I was sacrificing, in a way for, and then just kind of giving it to the Lord. Like, I think I felt like a part of me, I just had to set it aside. And, and I think because the farm has always been such a big part of me, I also didn't want to make it an idol. Like, I didn't want the place of coming to be back home. I wanted to check my heart on it too.
Yeah.
So, in that moment, I was willing to say, like, whatever, Lord, wherever you have me. But if you bring me back there, I'd be really happy. Just kind of the disclaimer.
Well, yeah, that had to be a hard shift, man. And I know it had to. You had to have been feeling a very strong, calling from the Lord to go back there, and care for your family. And you could have just blew that off, by the way, which is, I think, a lot of times what you might see in families that don't quite have the depth of relationship with their their history and their heritage, and even the interpersonal relationships within a family. It's really cool to me how close you felt, and you had you had that mentorship coming down from grandparents. Like the oldest remaining generation was able to literally mentor you out there in that environment. So I don't know. I just think that's so cool.
Yeah, and I'll say also, I mean, that was a huge part of my spiritual development. I think I've always felt, if I'm just telling you my true, like I think when I came to college, I realized I'd had a different upbringing. And, this was back in the day when there's an old country song. It says, I was country when country wasn't cool. Do you remember that song?
Oh, yeah. Know that song? You're so much better at singing than us, by the way. Yeah.
Oh, that's a good song. But no, I felt that way. I mean, I felt like, I talk a little more twangy, and I remember one of my friends having to explain to me what a cul-de-sac was. I didn't know what a cul-de-sac was in a subdivision. Like I didn't grow up in a community that had subdivisions, and so again, but I think there was also, like, I've kind of felt like some of the ways I grew up were portrayed as backwards. I think that sometimes when you're from the country, and as I was in this development, I kind of felt like some of my things were backwards. And even in church, like, I got involved in college and in my young adult life. Like, I was in a lot of bigger mega churches, which were wonderful and great and reaching tons of people. But the culture of those churches were very different than the little mountain country church that I grew up in, where those people farmed together, they lived together. Mr. Earl, like, I saw him, 2 or 3 times a week. And, so there was just a different, for me, there was just a different experience of community moving out of this and, living away for a season. And that wasn't bad. It was just different, just learning different and learning how my story, and placement in this world had developed me. And so I think, church has always never really been a place where, and I think that even like reading the Word of God, like my husband is an incredible thinker, and he studied in, theology, and like he loves the study of the Word. I mean, he will like study it. Now, I love reading the Word, but like I want to read it and I want to go sit in a field for an hour. Like I want to go like the Lord speaks to me through nature. I mean, that's how I deeply, deeply hear from the Lord. And I see it. Like, when my mom passed away, she loved bluebirds. And that was her symbol. It was her symbol of hope. And so she would always have this little phrase. She'd say, whenever you're having a bad day, I promise you, you just look out the window and you find a bluebird. You always find something to be happy about. You can always find a bluebird. And that year after she passed away, every single day, the Lord sent a bluebird to me. Every single day for a year. I mean, it would be the dead of winter.
Wow.
And it's those southeastern bluebirds with the bright blue chest, the little small ones. But, like, it was those. But, I think that for me, my spirituality has always been so connected to my family and community and the land.
The last part I want to hit on this relational aspect is when you did leave and go out into the city, did the ones that were behind, that stayed here, did they ever get to it? Was there ever a point where they started to see you differently?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
Did that affect you when you came back?
Oh, yeah. And even with my family. Yeah.
How have you overcome that?
I don't think I have.
Okay.
I think I still, it's such a great question.
You don't have to have an answer to it.
No. I think where I'm at is understanding, like, I'm in a place in my life where I feel more comfortable owning my story, like owning where I came from and being proud of that, but also being honest about it. Not just like white picket fencing it and like everything was perfect and rosy, but just like being honest about it. You know, I remember the first time I came home from college, my brother said, "You sound like a Yankee," you know, like he thought my voice was sounding different. And then I realized, you know, when I was in the corporate world, or not corporate world, but the education world, I was a teacher, and then I was training teachers, and you know, there was definitely a sense where I would adjust the way that I talked so that I could be heard, that I could seem credible, because I felt like the more of a country accent that I had, the more of a connotation there would be to my intelligence, or and so anyways, I think that you know, I felt moving back home the curiosity of like, well, you're different, but are you still the same?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Great answer. I asked that question because it's applicable to me in my life. I also went away for a long time, came back different, and you always wonder, what do people really think of? Like, what are they really thinking about? Not that it matters, but it's an interesting question to ask yourself. Like, this part of my people have stayed here, and they have carried out, you know, their life apart from me while I was gone. I've had a totally different experience than them, and now I'm back, and working yourself back into interaction and relationship with them is difficult sometimes.
Yeah, I think on being on the other side of that is like the question I would see someone like either of you asking is, I've left from what I was doing, and essentially now you're a different person coming back, and basically it is my family or these people that were here willing to accept me for who I am now, regardless. I mean, like in your situation, we didn't love you because of who you were before. We just loved you because you were family. And when you come back, the people that still love you because of you. And if you've changed, then you've just changed. And like, are they willing to accept who you are now? You know, I don't know if that makes sense, but that's what I think is that
some of them will be unwilling.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot that plays into that, though. I think some of the unwillingness is because your perspective and your beliefs have changed on certain things, and they don't like that, right? I think jealousy plays a part in it. I think there are many aspects that play a part in that being a difficult thing. You know what I mean? Yeah. Well, I tell you what, old Chili, he ain't never sat in on one of these serious conversations. He ain't saying much.
What, you want me to talk? What, you want me to talk over?
It's a little too serious for him, I think, ain't it?
No,
maybe he's just sitting over there learning.
He's reflecting.
You know, I'm actually very interested in her story, and I actually prefer serious conversations. So you can just shut your mouth, Chad.
You got new shoes on, man.
He bought new shoes.
Dang, man!
I didn't buy these. Quit trying to not make it serious. I was enjoying the conversation. I'm in deep thought over here.
He's a stew pot.
Well,
yeah,
you're a stew pot.
He's
just over there thinking.
Look, I don't know if you've
Chad can't handle my thoughts anyway, so
I don't know if you've ever seen Star Wars, Stacie, but this is young Luke, and
I've never seen that movie.
I'm Yoda, so this is good for him. Chili usually only has to come to work one day a week.
Would you get back to letting her tell her story? I'm interested in it.
I'm thinking, what a transition. Let's talk about Stacie's integration from Atlanta back to the farm. And, you know about.
I mean, Star Wars
Chili's
got
new shoes.
Hey, that's just the way he rolls. But I'm thankful that that I'm here because
look, Chili only usually has to come to work one day a week, but we've brought him on in for the second day this week because I wanted him to learn from you, Stacie. So,
bless you. That's kind.
Well, I appreciate getting to hear your story, man. I'd like for you to keep telling it.
All right.
Yeah, I wanted to say one more thing about that. God, I think what is also, I'm just gonna go for it, y'all. I think what's hard is, the world has their eyes on this little corner of the world right now. I just read, NBC News has a correspondent that is looking and not investigating, but reporting. And, I think what has caused in me to say is we can ask the question all day long, well, who am I? And we can think about, what defines that? Is it our past that defines that? Is it the place that we are from? And, I think all of us in this room know the answer to that, like where our true identity is from. And so, claiming that is really important to me, that above being from Dirt Town or, any political affiliation or whatever, like that the number one descriptor of me would be, to be a Christ follower, and that's where my true identity comes from. And so there is a vulnerability in some ways. For me, moving back home is also, that transition happened for me when I was away. And so, I think that, there's people from my past that can also see this transformation in me and feel like, am I this judgmental Christian now? Like, can we not have fun anymore? Like, how do I interact with you?
Yeah.
And so for me, I love, thinking of the personhood of Jesus, like really thinking of that. Like, Jesus was constantly doing things to surprise people. He was sitting with a woman at the well. Like, nobody did that, like nobody hardly does that now. It's like, don't sit with the women, but he did it. Like, and people were probably talking about him. And he showed up in ways that constantly caused people to question, who is he?
Wow.
Like, he's working on the Sabbath. He's healing people on the Sabbath. He can't be the Savior. Like, constantly keeping people in some way suspicion and questioning. And I'm like, man, that's the kind of Christian I want to be. Like, we'll maybe dive into some of my part of the story, but I think we're living in a time when people meet you, they want to figure out what box you go in. Like, let me sort you. Like, are you on this line? Are you on this side? Like, what do you believe? Are you with me? Are you for me? Are you against me? Like, where are we at? Let me size you up. And I just want to keep people guessing.
You're doing a mighty fine job at it. I think you're doing a mighty fine job at it.
Well, I think the reason that most people want to do that is because they're easily categorized themselves. And that's why I think that is. I think most people feel more comfortable when they just fit in all these boxes and they portray that to the world. So they want to do that to you. And I think that's, the most interesting people are people that do surprise you, that aren't predictable. When you're just, I don't know. I think that's part of what being interesting is not being where people can figure you out in 5 seconds of meeting you. And
I think that's part of being a peacemaker too.
Yeah.
And some of that's hard because it's like, if you're trying to, Jesus was the Prince of Peace, but peacemaking is a very active thing. And I think someone has said to me before and kind of spoke this over my life and said, they felt like I was a bridge, like I was able to kind of bridge different communities and conversations. And, I think that can only be, a gift from the Lord. But I think even sometimes bridges, like the danger in that is also standing in your own, not being a chameleon, like really finding your voice. And so for me, when I feel that pull of like, well, where do I belong? Knowing that, well, I have that answer, and that's where I find my rest.
So I know Stacie's husband. He's actually my counselor. He's mine and Brooke's marriage counselor. And when I've spent some time, obviously, with Stacie's husband, and when he kind of very gently revealed to me Stacie's most current, I guess you would say, mission. She talks about keeping people guessing and really going with the kind of outside of the box way, whatever direction, whatever, like, and creating these bridges. And so anyways, the way I reacted to Jeremy, oh gosh, I just said his name.
It's okay.
Okay.
That's
Jeremy.
all right.
I don't know, with his role, I know there's certain things. I think he told me I could say that he's my marriage counselor.
It is so the boundary of that is he's the one that has to be quiet.
Okay. All right.
He's the one, and I will say that about him. He holds space for people really well, and thank you for the things that you've said to encourage, because I know nothing about what happens behind his doors, because he wants to provide safe spaces for people. So thank you for acknowledging that.
Yeah, he does that because Jeremy knows things about me and my marriage and my business and stuff that just don't everybody need to know, because he gets the raw dump of everything.
And
but
he'll take it to the grave, man.
Yeah, man.
I can tell you that.
It is a honorable, I guess, place of service, and he's made for that, man. I'm telling you. But we'll have him on the podcast another day. But when he told me about your most recent mission, where you had the article published in the New York Times, which I read some of. I intentionally didn't want to dig too deep into that because I didn't want to have any preconceived notions of what your mission was, and I know how writers can take a story and make it what they want to make it into, because I've also been interviewed by some magazines and stuff, and what is put in there is usually pieces of what it actually is. The part that I did read was very interesting and intriguing, but my reaction to it was that, what the heck? I've never, like, we're in Northwest Georgia. Like, who's having this conversation in Northwest Georgia? Like, why would you not just brush that topic? Why would you not just brush that portion of your family's history just under the rug? I mean, who cares? Like,
yeah.
What good can come of you bringing that up in this cultural environment?
Yeah.
It really caught me off guard. My immediate response was to want to pass some sort of judgment on you, because I'm thinking, Jeremy's just telling me little pieces of it, and the word reparations comes up, and these words, and I immediately just want to say, what the heck? She must be some crazy lady to bring this up. Like, so you're living it out, man. You're living it out, and I think the path that you've chosen to take on this specific portion of your mission is a very Christ-like direction. I could see Jesus taking this route. And so it was, it's been so intriguing to me. And I just wish that you would go ahead and take us into that journey a little bit, as deep as you want to go. I mean, I want to hear what this portion of your mission is all about, how it came about, and the direction that you've went. And the listeners, I know you have no clue what I'm talking about right now, but I'm hoping Stacie will share with us, because it's pretty unique. And we need a break. Let's take a quick break, and then we're gonna jump into that. All right, sweet. Well, we're back. We'll talk about Chili's folly another day. I think we've set this conversation up just before the break for a kind of a shift gears into Stacie's most current mission. Mm-hmm. And so back to that conversation. Can you walk us through this journey?
I will. Yeah, I think this is definitely, journey is a good word, because this is not anything I have sought out to do, but more something that I think found me and has been in motion for many, many years before I was born. So after my mama and papa died, I was going through their house and found a box, a cowboy boot box, actually. And I opened it up, and Mama had just put all these like newspaper articles that she'd clipped out, like when my dad, was in 4-H, or when I was in beauty pageants, and like family pictures and family, like little history things. And so I was going through this box of just family history. And one of the things that I discovered was a printout of, it's a copy, not an original, but a copy of the Scoggins family slave records. And so it was really sobering to find this document and to see your family name on it, and to see slave schedule, at the top of it. And it was my great-great-great-grandfather, the first one to come here. And his name was W.D. Scoggins. And then under his name, there were 7 numbers. There were no names mentioned, just 7 numbers. And then listed off was male or female, and then their race. And then also their ages. And so it was 2 men in their 30s, and a woman, and then 4 children. And so the youngest was 6 months old. And so I really honestly felt like somebody punched me in the gut, because I was like, wow, like, okay, like, what do I do with this, And then I started kind of like remembering, like, I don't think I remember Pawpaw talking that much about this growing up. But then I remembered, okay, there was this one story. I had just had my first daughter. She was 13. I mean, she's 13 now, so this was 13 years ago. So she was 2 weeks old, and I was sitting in my mama and papa's house, and I was breastfeeding her, and I was having a really hard time producing milk, and she was not eating, and we were really concerned, and my papa, he could hear her fussing, and he was trying to comfort me, honestly. He was like, no, baby, that's not your fault. It's not your fault that you're not making enough milk, because I was crying, I was emotional about it. And he's like, that comes from all the women in your family. All the women in your family have had this problem. All the Scoggins women have had, problems with this. And then, I think the next story was just like, felt like why was he sharing this? But I think honestly, he had been in that place in life where he'd started telling me all these family stories, I think because he knew his time was coming to an end. And so then all of a sudden he was like, that's why your great-great-great-grandfather bought the slave woman. And then he said, her name was Hester. And she nursed my grandfather. And, my grandfather, he took care of the horses during the Civil War. And, all his brothers and him came home, and, they basically all became alcoholics because of the war and lost the farm, that farm that they were farming on. But they said Hester, he said Hester was so loved by the family that she stayed with the family after the Civil War was over. And, he said, we treated her real good. We treated her like family. And she's even buried with the family. And so, when I found this document, it was just like this moment. It was like a movie. It was like this. I had this flashback of like remembering that story. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is the purchase of when and why they bought Hester. Mm-hmm. And so then I found some more documents, some census records, which confirmed the story. And I found Hester. She was a landowner. She acquired land after the Civil War, and when she was freed, and then she actually she went and worked for the family. She worked for one of the children she nursed. She nursed all 12 of the Scoggins kids, and so after the Civil War, she actually went and continued to work for the family as a domestic servant. And so, I think I started like recognizing, and this is a hard family story to tell. And let me just say this, like, as I'm telling this, family stories are hard.
Yeah.
Whether we know or we don't know, like they're both hard, like the knowing and the not knowing. And I think it's hard because no family story is without its baggage.
Truth.
And so, I know there's probably people listening that think, this doesn't apply to me because, my family didn't have this history. But I think for me, I got to this moment of my life where I recognized this is part of my family story. And there's pain in this story. And I can't change the pain of that story. Like, it happened before I was born. But I can only control what I do with it from here on out. And so, I had a moment where I was like, there's been generations of, we just didn't talk about it. There was a lot of silence. And so there's part of me that just wanted to put it back in that box and just say, that's it. Like maybe my kids just don't need to know about this. Maybe I don't need to talk about this. And I, and I sat on it for a while. For a while, I didn't talk about it. I just sat on it and just thought of it and prayed on it. But there was something about the story and how it had been told to me and it had been told to my dad that it felt like this story is outside of our family also. Like this story is connected to other people. And the pain of that story is connected to other people. And I think what also was confusing as all this was unfolding, we've all like seen the cultural moments that we've been in over the last, even specifically over the last 2 years. And so, I think I think I even began to like really honestly fear and anticipate, like, how will people, like, if I start talking about this or asking neighbors or whatever, you know, how are they going to perceive me as a white woman talking about slave records? Like this, you know, are they going to, you know, see it as me trying to glorify something that in the past it's horrific, or, you know, you know, or you know, the other side of that, like why even talk about it? It's in the past. Like, you don't need to, you know, what's done is done, like, move on.
Yeah.
So I think I just felt conflicted, you know, and I wanted to make sure that my heart was in the right place, like that I was moving forward in a place that was motivated by the Lord. So I took the records and I went to our neighbor, Mr. Melvin Mosley, Pastor Melvin Mosley. And Pastor Mosley and his wife, Miss Betty, have been probably the most consistent spiritual mentors of my life. They've been there before I was born. My dad and Melvin grew up together. They worked on the farm and played with one another as boys. My dad didn't have any siblings, and so Melvin literally was like a brother to him. They were at each other's house every day, but they went to different schools because of the color of their skin. And so Melvin went to the black school, and my dad went to the white school, and they'd come home as 6-year-olds, and you know, Melvin and my dad would say, "Oh, we had chocolate milk today," and you know, Melvin would be like, "We didn't have chocolate milk today. Like, what? We don't get chocolate milk at my school." And so they had a brotherhood with one another. They had a deep relationship. And I know people say that often, you know, but this is true. Mm-hmm. Like, this was true. But they were born in a culture and in a society where they had to navigate these racial boundaries that were in place. So Melvin became an educator in our county. He was one of the first black educators to, you know, he grew up, went to college, and, you know, then stayed home and was my principal in high school. And so he, he's just always been there, you know. And so I went to him because I have this relationship with him. And I knew I could have a hard conversation with him. And I knew I would be loved. And I knew my motives would not be questioned. And I knew he'd be honest. And so we started talking about the story. And I told him how the story had been told to me, you know, and he was like, yeah, I mean, you know, he helped retell that family story. He's like, yeah, well, the reason that she stayed with the family is because she had nowhere to go, you know, as a slave woman back then. And so
that's what I was thinking too.
Yeah. And so, you know, we started talking about that, and, you know, and then he just stopped and he said, you know, this should have been talked about before you were born, Stacie. Like, and I just said, will you pray for me? And man, Melvin has the gift of speaking into the moment. You know, I think when and I want to be this person. I hope I'm becoming this person. But it's like when we are in community with one another and we recognize, like, hey, you're in a moment in your life. Like, this is a marker for you. This is a pivotal point in your life. Mm-hmm. And as an elder in your life, or as a spiritual mentor, like, I have the ability right now to speak into your life. And he spoke into my life, and he prayed for any generational bondage of racism to be broken, that it would be broken with my line, and that, like, moving forward, that I would be able to take it further than my dad and my grandfather did. And, you know, he thanked the Lord for them because he knew, you know, who they were. And then he said, and I'll never forget this phrase, he said, Lord, I just pray that Stacie would pour out love on that place. Like, that's your calling on that farm. You know, use that farm for good. Pour out love on that place. And so, so that was my charge, you know, and Melvin, you know, he wasn't trying to absolve me of any like white guilt or anything like that. That wasn't what the conversation was like. The conversation really was like him calling me forward as a community elder, like him saying, now it's your turn. It's your turn. It's your place. So, so I've been trying to walk that out. So what happened next was I went to a farming conference. I met a guy who is a chef and a farmer, and he was leading a session for Black farmers. And I went to this session, and I stood up in this room and Black farmers, and I heard stories of how many of their families had lost their land, like during the 60s and 70s, and or were denied, you know, access to loans to acquire property. And so many of them were talking about the struggle or the connotation within the community, the Black community, of returning to farming because of the association of being oppressed through slavery by the land, like working the land was the oppression. So, you know, I was listening to their stories and listening to their journeys, and, you know, I was one of the only white women in the room. And I really had that moment of like, do I talk here? Like, you know, if I get emotional, is it going to be, you know, how's this, I mean, I just started getting in my head, like, how are people going to perceive me right now? And even question my own heart. Like, I need to be aware of how my voice enters this space. And so I think that was felt in the room, because what I said was, I'm here and I need to learn. I need to learn what pouring love out on this place looks like. And I need to learn what it looks like to make it right. And so unbeknownst to me, there was a New York Times reporter in the room at the time. And so after the conference was over, she pursued me and my friend Matthew and said, I want to follow your story. And then COVID hit like 2 weeks later. And so it was crazy, because when she kind of picked back up with us, you know, I was in the midst of like moving back to the farm and still like recovering this stuff. But it was a wonderful opportunity working with her. I mean, it was anytime you tell a story, it's a vulnerable process. But she was very kind in hearing the story. But then also there was, you know, all these things that were unfolding culturally at that moment with, you know, the George Floyd footage that everybody was watching, and just you know, all the stuff, even like there was no space for people to gather and have these conversations. So everybody was just being, you know, pissed off and angry, and all this stuff was coming out. Like, people are just being, I mean, I was like, woo, social media was just like a horrible place at the time, you know? And so, I mean, I think I even in the moment of the story felt like, gosh, like, you know, I have to stay focused here. Like, I can't be distracted. Like, this is all important as well, but also like me doing this is not a reaction to all of these other things.
Well, it could have easily been seen that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also these things are important in unfolding. I mean, I believe all things come to pass and you know, under the Lord's hand. And so like it was no coincidence that all of this was happening in that timing. And so after the article came out, you know, what was surprising was a ton of people reached out with like positive feedback. And Mr. Melvin and I were talking, and we were like, you know, it's crazy, because I think the world is just really starved for hope right now. And
yeah, it is.
Yeah. But I think also sometimes hope pisses people off. So I got the both and for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I can only imagine you did. All right, I have to understand on a deeper level, like, what were you trying to reconcile after you had your conversation and your prayer with Mr. Melvin, and then you decided to go to this meeting of black farmers? Like, what were you trying to reconcile with something internally, or was there a bigger mission at that point? Like, because you said it was, at some point you figured out this was bigger than just, this healing process and this conversation was bigger than just what you had to deal with. But did it turn into that, or was it that initially? I don't know if you understand that question or not.
I think what I felt from Melvin's prayer was this, him calling me out, like, pour love on that place and to hold love for that place. And I think in moving forward, I was trying to work out, like, what that practically looked like, what that logistically looked like.
Oh, okay.
Not just as a sentiment, but, like, what does that mean on a day-to-day?
Okay.
Like, how do I walk this out?
Yeah.
So, that was some of what the article was about. But one of the things I have been doing was I worked with Berry College. I worked with an anthropologist at Berry College, Dr. Brian Campbell, and a team of his students. And we've been documenting for the past 2 years the journey of me moving back home and recording interviews with me and Mr. Melvin and Miss Betty. And then we interviewed the last remaining black farmer in Chattooga County. He's 78 years old. He's the last one left. So we interviewed stories of white farmers, just to get, like, a community sense of, like, this is a community story. And so let's invite all voices to the table.
Okay.
Here. So from that, we started having reconciliation conversations and workshops on the farm where we would have, students come, and we'd have Mr. Melvin and Miss Betty come, and, we would eat food together and have dinner together. But then we would talk about, we talk about the records. We talk about family history. We talk about these cultural moments that students were navigating. So, that was part of, moving forward, the practical place of, like, how to use the farm as a place of love. And I think, again, part of the conversation has also been reparations. And that's a hard word to say, because as soon as you say it, people go, la, 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 la. It's like people don't want to hear it, or they have, even myself, like, there's something about the word that is like, it makes me uncomfortable, to talk about it. It makes me really uncomfortable. And so I'm still wrestling with that, because, reparations, just to give a basic definition, is basically, a monetary stipend that would be given and compensated when wrong has been done, or when. And so, for example, like in World War II, when the Japanese were sent to camps here in America, the government gave reparations to Japanese Americans after that time happened. There's been, some reparations given to Native Americans. And so now one of the big conversations in our country is government reparations for Black Americans. And so, that was kind of the pressing question, and still is on my mind, because, reparations, I think, honestly, is a biblical thing. You think about what is it, the year 7 Jubilee? I mean, that's what the Jubilee was, giving the land back. So I know there's biblical concepts of reparations, but like when you're talking about walking it out and the practical thing of it, oh man, that's tough because, now we're 150 years removed from this. And then, where do you start with that? If you were going to, as an individual, it's very complicated because if you were going to give money, how do you do that? How do you put a price on that?
That's what I'm sitting here thinking.
Well, the government involvement is tough too, right? Because, one thing, like you said, the timetable is reparations. If there was going to be some that needed to be done, would have needed to have been done at the time. So Hester didn't have to, like when you had that discussion with Melvin and he talks about where was she going to go?
Yeah.
A place could have been provided for her then.
Yeah.
But now, how would you walk that out now? Like you keep asking. Well, it would look like the government creating a new tax for us that we would have to pay into that, which is that the way to do it?
Well, and it's so tough.
All that's going to do is make people angry.
Right.
It's
right.
How
it's complex.
How are we taxed for that? It's like we've passed this window.
Well, and what happened was after the Civil War, that's where the 40 acres and a mule came from. It was a reparation, but then the U.S. government took that back and revoked it. So, it is, again, I have spent a lot of time thinking of this, and my head's still spinning. And what I want to say, because again, I wanted to hear what Mr. Melvin thought in this conversation, and, Mr. Melvin and Miss Betty and I sat down, and when we sat down with the reporter and this question was kind of posed, there was also a sense for them where, Miss Betty said it beautifully in the article. She said, we want justice. We don't want a handout. And so, that's when they turned to me and said, all you need to do is pour out love on that place. Mm-hmm. And again, here's the deal. I think at the end of the day, I can ask the question, and Chad and you and I were talking about this a little bit after CrossFit the other day, but this is where I'm at personally with it. I want to be willing to live my life in a way that I say, whatever, Lord, whatever you require of me, I will do. When I think about Nicodemus, when he saw Jesus, he ran down the road as a taxpayer and he paid back all the people 4 times what he owed them. And then he went back to Jesus, and Jesus said, surely salvation has come to your house. So when I think about that story, I think about I have a choice here. I can think, I can just say, well, I wasn't involved in that. It's not on me. It's in the past. What's done is done. Or I could say the other side of that, which is it'll never be enough. I could pay reparations for the rest of my life and it would never be enough to pay back monetarily the evil that's been done. And to live in shame for something, just to live in that place of shame. But I think that there's such a difference between shame and conviction. And for me, I want to live in that place of conviction because I think the conviction is being compelled by love. And so, I'm trying to walk this out and not paying penance for the rest of my life because I'm a descendant of enslavers. I'm trying to walk this out because hope my house, I know my house, but I want people to see the hope of what happens when salvation comes to my house. So, currently, I'm stewarding that space for this conversation and giving a lot of my time and resources towards that. And I have snags, man. I have days where I wake up where I'm like, God, because honestly, what I feel at the end of the day is, and what a lot of the feedback was from the New York Times article, a lot of people were like, there were a lot of people encouraging me, that was very kind. But then there was a lot of people that were that the feedback that confirms your worst fears, those comments you read that are like, oh yeah, people are saying the thing I don't want them to say.
Yeah.
Because they're seeing anyway. So the thing that got in my head, and it still gets in my head, is, but paying the penance of like, well, your family owned slaves, you don't deserve that land, and you should sell the land and sell the farm. But then that sets up a whole other set of issues,
Yeah.
So anyways, I am hoping to continue to move forward in this posture of love. But man, I have to be renewed in it every day.
Well, I think about this as far, to me, if you were to give a portion of your land or give money to descendants of people who were enslaved, then that, like, to me, that's an easy way out for you. Like, it's a one-time thing, right? Here's this land, we did you wrong, I'm sorry. It's one-time thing, it's done. And for them, to me, it would be a slap in the face, because it's saying you think that this amount of land or this amount of money is worth the wrong that I went through. And who are you to put value on the wrongings of it? And it's not direct to them, but if Hester were still here, who are we to put value on whatever Hester had to endure there? And it's the hard way out to say, okay, I'm not going to do that, but I'm going to make this lifelong commitment to pour out love on this land and use it to bring awareness and light to this situation. And to me, that's a form of reparation, right? Like, that is how you're repaying what was wrong, by bringing light to it and using your land for the good of, in spite of all the bad that was done to it. Like, I think that's the honorable and hard way out, because then,
you can say that, but obviously not everybody's going to agree with that.
Well, how I see what you said is, people say you don't deserve that land. I wouldn't disagree with that, but nobody does. Nobody deserves that land. I don't think you do. I don't think the descendants of any slave out there deserves that land. I don't think I deserve it. But how I see it is, God has given you that land now. And kind of going along with what Blake says, none of us deserve that land. You're not going to find somebody out there that deserves it, but it's been given to you now, and you can do good with it.
Yeah.
And I think that's why you are back on it. And you're back on it now in this time, and you're doing good with it, and you're pouring out love on it. I think, I think sometimes where we get into trouble with these conversations is we talk about what we deserve or what somebody deserves. So none of us deserves anything. And when someone is wronged, in a sense, they deserve something, for that. But I don't know that you can give them what they deserve, other than, that's why I like what Melvin said, love.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and I think, like, the core of reparations, that word is to repair.
Right.
Mm.
And, how foolish is it for us to think that a relationship can only be repaired by money?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I literally just made a note that goes right along the lines with that. And I think the reality of this this is that it's very, very hard not to become opinionated in terms of this conversation and this topic, which is immediately when I think of how I want to respond to this, it's near impossible to not, have my opinion reflect through in my response. But I will say along the lines of what you just said, Stacie, you talk about giving something of true value, like giving back something of true value. Well, I'm going to go ahead and tell you, money is not that thing.
Yeah.
Money really has no true value. I mean, it is just this thing that we use to trade for things that we need now. But like real healing, like value in terms of it can heal and restore, it cannot accomplish that.
Yeah.
It can accomplish that. Like, what are things of true value? Things that truly are valuable are things like time, things like conversation, things like thoughtfulness, love. Those are the things that we can offer to each other that possess true value in order to restore whatever the situation is. So, I don't know. I'm doubtful that our nation. Oh man, I'm just straight up. I'm doubtful that our nation, in the current shape that it's in, can come to a conclusion on this. This. I'm thankful that there is someone like you that has deep conviction and not guilt, in order to take this mission on and walk this journey out. It's amazing to me the courage it takes, because I had a question on my thing here, and the question is, how does this that you're talking about, Stacie, how does this relate in comparison to the new cultural narrative of white shame? And I think you answered the question. It's the difference between guilt or shame and conviction to restore relationship with your brothers and sisters that have a dark history because of our dark history as a white people. It's deep, man. It's really deep.
And you can feel the difference. I mean, I know in my own heart with anything, not just this conversation, but with any heart sin issue, I know the difference between like when the Lord is convicting me, because the kindness of the Lord leads us to repentance. The kindness, and there's just this like, I want to do this. Like I want to do this. Like not like I have to do this, but this ease to it where, shame, I feel like there's this, it almost like gets like at your throat. Like it just feels like, like I'm straining, like, white knuckling my way through this, or just, like it physically feels different in your body.
Yeah. I want to ask one thing that you said that was I think very important to me, was you talked about the relationship between your father and Mr. Melvin, not only as children, but throughout their life. And then Mr. Melvin being a part of your life coming up. And, I think that there is a perspective that is propagated in the mainstream quite often that we hate each other because of our difference in color. And especially, your father's generation, in rural Georgia, surely they hated each other.
Yeah.
How has the black community that you've interacted with. And you know what? I hate even using the word black community.
Me too.
I hate even. I mean, these are obviously speaking specifically about the group of black farmers that Stacie went and engaged. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's a meeting primarily to discuss issues that black people have experienced in their past. But, you know, the reason I hate using the word black community is because that's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous. And it goes against what the Bible tells us about us.
Well, you know why we use it?
We are all one in Christ. We use it because it's been propagated.
No, I'll tell you why we use it. We use it because of the past that Stacie is talking about.
Yeah.
Because they have been alienated. Slavery caused this fit. It's frustrated me for a long time, you know, when people refer to the black community or the white community or whatever community. But you can't get frustrated at black individuals that talk about the black community because what else do they talk about? They've been alienated by white people for years, and that's pretty fresh now. So it doesn't frustrate me anymore. I understand why they do it. I'd like to get to a point where we don't have to refer to that.
Yeah.
But that's going to take time.
No,
I mean,
and no wonder the conversations that you're having are so hard to have.
Yeah.
We see this right here. Like, what language do you even use to portray these relationships?
Yeah.
Like what language? And it's not. Let me make this clear. It's not because I'm worried about offending anybody.
Me neither.
I could care less. All right.
Yeah.
I'm worried about getting to the root of this and having some healing and some continuity in the community, right? In culture. Like, that's the root of it. So that's why the language, that's why I'm even concerned about the language, because if you're not careful, the language you use will just simply continue to propagate the division that does exist. But I mean, I assume you've been received with open arms.
Yeah, I think what the difference is, I'm received by those who know me too. Like, I think that it's been a very healing story. But, you know, speaking to my dad and Mr. Melvin, you know, they knew each other. Like, we know each other as neighbors and as brothers and sisters. And that called them forth in a even a place where culturally, back when they were born, it was not there. But I mean, what I have seen, to be honest, and to what you said about black community, it's again, there's just been, I see, and what I'm in awe of is specifically, I just want to speak to the black church, which again, I think that Sunday mornings is one of the most segregated times in our culture still today.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
So, but I think those spaces have been necessary for the healing of that community to take place, because that was literally one of the only places where they could experience freedom or expression of what the suffering they were going through. That's why some of those black spirituals are just, you know, when you read the words of them, you're like, you know, they're clinging to like the songs of the people of Israel, you know, I mean, like they're so understanding of what bondage, like the residue of bondage, like even, you know, generations of people, you know, we're so far out, they still understand the curse of what that bondage was like and the residue of how it still exists. And I think, I mean, I will say as a white-bodied person, like, I don't think even in my own self that I probably have understood that in a way that like that a person with black skin would, because there's just a different experience. And so I think for me, with entering into this conversation, I think that I have been so surprised at the grace extended to me. Like, and honestly, the gratefulness, and this, to me, this just feels like, like not that hard, but the gratefulness that has been expressed to just acknowledge that harm was done.
Yeah.
Like, just to acknowledge that something bad went down, and that feels like the bare minimum right there. But that I think, again, is part of that repairing that relationship. Like when you need to repair a relationship, you got to acknowledge that something has been broken.
You know what's interesting about that statement right there is that acknowledgement of it, like the reality of it, is extremely important. But what I see happening is the acknowledgement of it a lot of times leads to emotions like anger. The acknowledgement leads to bad emotions, which leads to the destruction of the historical evidence that you would even need to acknowledge and get to the bottom of it. And, it's been crazy to me to watch over the last few years as governmental authorities are tearing down monuments that represent a history that we refuse to acknowledge. But when we do decide to acknowledge it as a culture, instead of acknowledging it, pouring love into it, experiencing healing through it, we acknowledge it and then immediately begin to tear down whatever evidence there was of it, so that it will, and what that will lead to is actually
it will not be remembered.
It will not be remembered, and then it will repeat itself.
Yeah,
it's a terrible reaction to the acknowledgement.
I believe it's going to repeat itself regardless, because that's just what history does. But that is certainly the way to ensure that it will. But also, as far as slavery specifically goes, I mean, that's obviously been prevalent from the beginning of time.
Yeah.
And is continuing on. That's why I have no disillusions that it will ever go away completely, because there's slavery today in many forms. China is enslaving Uyghur Muslims along with Christians today by the millions, and we ignore it. And as far as human trafficking and that form of slavery, it's prevalent today. And I can't help but think a lot of these discussions, not the types of discussions that we're having and that Stacie's having, but these other discussions you see loosely around this topic, it's a distraction amongst those, along with what Chad's saying. It's almost destined to repeat itself here in America. And it's a distraction from the other forms that we see today. So, yeah, I think some people need to evaluate the conversations that they're having and see if they're actually, what are they producing? Because some of the conversations that deny this history, or not even to cover it up, that's not doing any good.
Yeah.
You're not going to learn anything.
Or conversations that are being had simply to
make people feel
evoke negative, or make them feel angry, or
some
upset,
people feel
negative emotions.
Well, and I think again, there's been a lot of silence, and and I think that silence has an evil to it as well, because even within my family, like unintentionally, there's been some operating in some shame. Like, we don't want to talk about this. We're going to cover it up. We're going to just keep it with the family. And, we just discovered that, Hester's descendants are actually connected to Miss Betty, Melvin's wife, Miss Betty Mosley. And, when we discovered this, it was just this strange joy with her, she was like, this is part of my family history that I was like, we didn't know because we didn't have the knowledge of these stories. So, it was like you really felt like this generational restoration happening in that moment, but then you felt the grief of it too. I think the same as I said, you mentioned like the monuments and all of these things. Like, I don't think we've told the story well in the past.
Yeah.
And I think that's why this feels so complicated in the moment that we're in now, is it's, all of these things are bumping into one another, and we haven't told the whole story.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't, and again, there's relationship. God, I really believe when we truly know somebody, it's hard to hate them. Yeah. It's a lot easier to hate somebody you don't know.
Yeah. Well, and we can get aggravated about them tearing down monuments and doing the things that are not fixing this. But the fact of the matter is, the people that are doing all that don't want it fixed.
Well,
and you even think, like when you mentioned that your dad and Mr. Melvin played together as kids, it made me think that in that time, most people would think everybody's racist, right? Like the schools are segregated. I don't know who came up with segregated schools, but I would assume it was public schools, so it's probably some governmental thing.
Oh, it'd take a long time, but
you think, okay, the government has just continued this segregation here, but here are two kids playing together, black and white, that are clearly not racist, and clearly their parents are, or they would not have let them play together, but the schools are still segregated. And then you fast forward to today, and what's being put out on the news, and it's all this Black Lives Matter stuff, and all of that is just more division that's being put out by the people who don't want the American people to come together. They don't want it fixed. And it takes people like us having this conversation and people on the other side who have problems just the same that we do, and finding some common ground and saying, look, it was wrong. Let's like move on. Let's figure out and let's reconcile this, and not move on and forget it, but let's move forward in a better manner than what we've been doing.
And that's what Jesus did. Like you think about the story of the Good Samaritan.
Mm-hmm.
When he was telling that story, he was using like names of groups of people that he knew. When he was talking to that audience, they'd be like, oh, well, that person would never stop for a Jew. Yeah. He intentionally was speaking to what you're saying. He was saying, he was trying to he was surprising people. He was calling people out of that, calling people back to humanity. But I think that, let me give this story. This is a personal story, but I want to say it because I feel like it's a story of hope, and I feel like it needs to be told. I'm going to try to remove some names, but anyways, I had a family member that, very close family member, had a rebel flag flying on his porch throughout the election, and for him, that flag symbolized kind of like, honestly, Southern heritage and being country, like being from the country. There's this connotation to that. Again, we live in a community where neighbors know each other really well. And so Mr. Melvin stopped in to this family member's home, and he just had a conversation with him. And he said, listen, I understand what that flag means to you, but I want you to consider also what my family sometimes thinks when I see that flag, and what we associate it with. And it's your personal property. You can do whatever you want. But I just wanted to say, just because you might not have considered that, you might not have considered what it brings back for us on this side.
Yeah.
And he took it down. and he put up an American flag. But that conversation couldn't happen with a person that he didn't know.
Yeah.
Like, he removed that because he knew Melvin loved him and because he loved Melvin.
Yeah, he had respect for what he had to what he had to say to him.
Yes.
Gosh, dog, man. Let's take a little break real quick. All right. Tell you what, man, you guys freaking stress me out. It's like herding cats around here, man. You just, Chili, we take a break. We're standing here for 10 minutes. And when we're ready to start the podcast again, you walk outside.
You aren't ready.
You stress me out, dude.
You know what stresses me out? When the guest shows up to the podcast studio before you.
That did happen.
We showed up at the same time.
Her car was coming to the gate before yours.
Well,
I can open a gate.
Well, you weren't. I didn't go out when you were ready. I came back in here and was ready before you were. I had my headphones on before you, sitting here in position, looking at you.
you see, this is one of Chili's main problems. His hard-headedness.
It's because he had to wear a school uniform all his life.
Oh, okay.
Well, that's true. I did have to wear a school uniform, but I'm not. I am hard-headed too, but I think that's got me far in life. My stubbornness. You stubborn?
It's gotten you 22 years.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good thing. Stubborn people get stuff done.
You know, with this conversation that we're having, I really wish that we could come up with some definitive solutions or plans of action or just the layers of it, though, are so deep, man. You know, why one reason why I am so passionate about this specific topic is, well, not just this topic, but one reason why your mission and your story appeals to me so much. For the listeners, maybe not so, but for me, it appeals to me in a big, big way. One, because I see this as one of the core issues of our nation.
Of humanity.
Humanity, that's it.
Well, yeah, of humanity, but I'm going to go ahead and tell you,
That's it.
there are, I've been all over the world, man. And other nations don't have these issues on the level that we have them here in America.
I think they have them on a bigger level.
I think
having slave, like, you talking about slavery or what?
No, just the tension,
The division.
the division, culturally, as it pertains to skin color.
Well,
Well,
I
it's
think
because they don't have a say in it. Like, I mean, their division was not, when slaves were prevalent in America, the division was not here because the slaves didn't have a say, right?
No, I'm just saying.
Listen,
I can agree with you guys. And if you want to say this is one of the core issues of humanity, I'm going to just say it's one of the core issues.
what is racism is a core human problem, but the division you're talking about, sure, that's uniquely American because America's unique.
Yeah,
it manifests itself differently all over the world.
So another reason that this conversation is really impactful to me is because I grew up in the grips of racism and deep hatred that I felt toward other people that weren't the same color as me, and I also received hatred from people that weren't the same color as me back at me. Right, and it caused a lot of Like there were times in my young adult life where it consumed me. It's been very prevalent. This has been racism as it pertains to American culture has been very prevalent in my entire young adult childhood, all that, all the way up through, right? So what allowed me to break free from those chains of hatred and division and all that, believe it or not, it wasn't Jesus. It wasn't my salvation. It wasn't. It was my career in the Navy. Like it totally changed my heart, my perspective, my thought, my train of thoughts, everything. It changed everything. Because when you are thrust into an environment that's dangerous, where life and death is on the line, right? And you depend on the actions of the man to your right and left, all of a sudden you realize all this freaking bull crap about color is exactly what it is. It's some manufactured bull crap is all it is. It's astounding when you have that revelation. That is probably one of the most transformative things that came out of my service in the Navy. I'm just so thankful for it, man. I am so thankful for it. And the military, the U.S. Navy, specifically the SEAL teams, was probably one of the least racist, if you want to call it, environments that I've ever inhabited in my entire life. Because all the superfluous manufactured bullcrap is burned off by the danger that the imminent danger that we would face sometimes on a daily basis. You know, you said something earlier, Stacie, that was interesting to me, and you talked about the disconnect between you said there was only one black farmer left in Chattooga County, and the disconnect between a black American and the land because of the history, right? I forget how you exactly said it, but that was so interesting to me because we also see that disconnect. In other words, we haven't had a single student come out of the basic course yet that has been black or Asian, or it's all been, we've had some Hispanics and mostly white students. And like that bothers, I've been trying to get at the root of that. Like, where is the disconnect coming from? And we talk about layers and you say, man, there's a layer I never even thought about. You know?
Well, why does that bother you?
It bothers me because I realize that there is that's a problem. Like, it bothers me because it's a problem. And
there are black people that are interested in this, and why aren't they coming to our course? He's worried that there might be, right? Like there's what else is going on that are preventing them from attending our course?
I'm also a thinker, and I think about these things. So like when I see something that's off or skewed, I think about like, what is the reason for this? And you know,
I just don't evaluate things that way. Like it wouldn't have dawned on me that the demographics of the people that attended I don't know. I just don't.
Well, and I think,
that's reality.
I think it's something.
I mean, it's not anything that dawns on me. It's the reality of it.
No, like I wouldn't pay attention to the skin color of the people that were coming out there. Like it wouldn't even hit me. Like
But I think it's something good to be curious about. And again, like I say that not because that's my own beliefs, but because that's what I've heard from black farmers and the experience of, even this older black farmer who's saying not many people in my family, younger, are interested in farming because of this.
Exactly.
And so, again, farming and the work that you do, I mean, it's both so, like, your part of your purpose and my purpose, I think, are very similar in that we feel connected to the land, and we love bringing people in a setting that they can connect themselves with the land. And part of that is, what are the narratives or the barriers that might be going into that person that could prevent them from that experience or discourage them from that experience. I mean, I know for me, being a woman, I mean, gosh, like, I did some of the farming work growing up, and I know that my strength is not that of a man my age, but at the same time, I think I'm stronger than some dudes I've met too. But again, for me, a narrative has been, man, I don't know if I'm physically strong enough to do the work of farming.
Yeah.
That's why I joined CrossFit. Like, I'm 40 years old. I have never moved my body like this. And dude, I mean, I am physically engaging in a way in the last 2 years I have never done. And I'm proud. I mean, I'm proud that I'm stronger than I was 2 years ago. But like, there were narratives that I didn't even realize were affecting me and the way that I viewed even the work of farming, or the work of the land, or the engagement of the land. And so that's what I hear you saying. Like, you're just curious, like, what are people's narratives about that experience that could be affecting them?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, you're exactly right. Very eloquently put, much more so than I put it. I have so many questions, but we got to wrap this up at some point. What is, okay, your current, this is your current mission then? Like, I mean, if there was closure on this, it would be a wonderful thing, but there's no closure on it in sight. What is, like, where are you going now with the farm, with your day-to-day? Like, what is your vision? I'm curious.
Yeah, I think it is my mission, but it's a mission that feels not something that is out with this specific point yet or agenda. It feels more right now like the mission is also being done in me. That's part of the mission.
Yeah, I get that.
And so it's it's a lot, and that's a messy process. It's messy to kind of know, like, well, this is where I feel. I mean, it'd be really nice for me to say XYZ, here's a little, let's tie this up with a bow, this is what it's going to look like. But I think, honestly, in some ways, like, the journey that I feel like I'm on is continuing to make me dependent on the Lord in this, as far as what's next. And so, I'm just acting on the next thing, and so, we're about to put this film out into the community. And we're going to continue these conversations on a communal level. I think I have a lot to learn about facilitating those conversations and what that's going to look like. I'm stumbling into that, and again, I think it's really difficult because, as you mentioned before, like, you don't want to offend anybody, but when you're having a communal conversation, you're aware that certain things are going to bump up against each other. And so people are going to have conflict. And, like, if I really want to use my place as a place of healing, am I willing to be a facilitator of uncomfortable conversations? So I'm trying to learn how to do that.
Yeah.
And I think part of that learning is noting within myself how I feel when I'm in an uncomfortable conversation. you know, what goes up in me, which is a lot of times like I want to be a lot of self-preservation and, you know, goes up in me. And so I'm hopeful that, you know, my farm can continue to be a place used for love, a place to teach people, a place to connect people to the land. Blake and his girls came out there, and I mean, I just loved seeing your kiddos like getting to milk the cow and you know, just being on the land. Like there's something that, I mean, there's not words for it. Like there's something about just putting people in that setting that it just does the work. Mm-hmm. And I would love to have more opportunities to do that on my farm. Just to allow people to come out and maybe they don't need to talk. Maybe they need to come and pet a horse for a while.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, so I mean, I've got hands wide open right now. You know, I'm hopeful. But we'll see. We'll see.
Isn't it an interesting concept to be willing to step into a conversation where you are okay with being offended by someone's perspective? Mm-hmm. That's a very foreign, I think, that's a very foreign concept for a lot of people. Like, and maybe gets at a lot of the root of why conversations like this have been swept under the rug for so long, is we are very hesitant to walk into a group or a room or to facilitate something where with a heart that is prepared to say, okay, if I fully expect to be offended by someone else's perspective on this subject, and I'm okay with that. I'm gonna work through that. That's very rare.
Yeah, and I think we have to equip people to not avoid that, but what do we do when that happens? That's what people don't know how to do. That's why we're seeing, like you said, I mean, like, I think you're right. Like, I don't know. I mean, I feel the division. I feel these moments of trepidation of what's to come for our country. But I think that's it. It's like we can't avoid the conversation. Well, we can't avoid the conversations, but like, how do we respond when the ouches happen, when the toes get stepped on, and how do we almost like prepare us if that's going to happen?
Yeah,
it needs to happen.
Yeah. I can tell something's burning on your heart, Chili.
No, I was just confused about, what do you mean be offended by someone's perspective? I'm sitting here pondering that. I'm like, why would you be offended by someone's perspective? I'm curious.
Well, that's just kind of the reality of life.
Well, no, I mean, you talked about like stepping in and facilitating a conversation. Like, why would we be offended by hearing someone else's perspective on what we're talking about?
Because it's contrary to what you think, and people don't like to be disagreed with.
It's contrary to what you believe. Yeah. So your perspective is shaped by your experiences in life. So a lot of times you think your perspective is truth, right?
Right, but it's your perspective.
Well, okay, but unfortunately, most people, including myself, find themselves in a situation where they're thinking their perspective is truth because it's all that they know of the world, right? So when someone comes at you with something that goes against your truth, that ain't fun.
Well, it's like a colorblind person and someone who sees color, and they say the lid of that water bottle's blue, and you're colorblind, and you say, no, it's not. That is black.
I don't know.
And I say, no, it's blue, and you go back and forth, and in reality, to you it's black, to me it's blue. It's a lid, but it's like you can, I don't know, in that situation you're not offended by it, but on a deeply rooted topic such as this, someone who has been hurt by this could be.
I just have a hard time understanding the concept of being offended. It's always been.
And so on. I mean, since this conversation has revolved around the topic of race, kind of relations, in a way, it's been much more than that. But okay, let's look at this the current narrative of this critical race theory, where we talk about pieces like the white shame and stuff like that. Like, for somebody has a perspective where that is true to them. All right, whoever's formulating that, maybe some people are formulating it for the wrong reasons, but people that are propagating that for them because of this perspective that's been formed, that's truth to them. Well, I'm offended by that. Like, I'm going to be straight up with you, because it goes totally against my perspective on this, right? So where is the actual truth? Well, it's probably somewhere in the middle of the two perspectives, right? But anyways, that's I guess that's the best way that I can explain entering into conversations around, because if somebody came up to me and wanted to discuss critical race theory or something like that, I'm more than likely going to start from a very defensive position instead of actually going into it saying, okay, let's actually get to the bottom of this thing. You know what I mean? So, what you got, Blake?
No, I don't have anything else to add there.
Okay. Yeah. Stacie, how can well, first of all, I want to ask you, is there anything else on your heart that we've missed, that you feel like you feel like the world needs to hear? And when I say the world, I mean literally the world. We have thousands of listeners in the UK and Australia and New Zealand and all over the world. So we get to reach a lot of people through this platform God's given us. So just want to open it up to you, if there's, because I know there's parts of your story that I'm sure we brushed over.
I think that I hope that what people can hear and take into their own lives from this is we all have an opportunity to walk out our stories and our lives in a powerful, hopeful way. And that calling and that place of living missionally, as you said, Chad, I think can be distracted by a lot of different things. But if we stay the course and we stay true to what we know we are called to, and in a way own our own path, own our own role in this journey, I think that's all we can do. At the end of the day, the simple thing that I'm trying to do is love my neighbor as I love myself. The first command in my life is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, strength, and mind. And the second commandment is to love thy neighbor as you love yourself.
Wow. Yeah.
That's the solution. You say there isn't really a solution. I mean,
that's the mission.
Yeah, that's it. There really is one.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was good. You think we could ever get Mr. Melvin on the podcast?
Oh, he would be amazing.
I told her that when I think I passed him when I left your house. He's sitting out on his porch there.
Oh, it might have been. Yeah.
I told her that when we went over there. I said, man, he sounds like a good one, just from the little bit you told me about him at your house.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I love this. I love this type of content and this type of conversation. I mean, I could make a whole podcast series just hearing different perspectives on this topic. personally. So that would be cool. But, man, Stacie, I just want to thank you so much for being who you are, for your courage, just your unwavering commitment, for your generosity. It's just, I don't even have words for it other than thank you, because you are making a difference. This conversation has made a difference in me personally, and I've known you now for months and see you just about on a daily basis. But the fact that you set aside the time out of your schedule to come have this conversation with me impacted me greatly, and I thank you for that.
Well, thank you guys. It's been truly an honor to sit with you today to talk about this.
Well, all right, guys. I guess we will we'll wrap it up. And last thing, I want to know, Stacie, if you could tell the listeners where they can find you, follow you, come be a part or interact with you, whatever it may be.
Sure. You can follow along our farm journey on Mountain Mama Farms on Instagram. And we also have a blog, mountainmamafarms.com. And, yeah, be sure to check us out and follow along.
I love it. And I'll attach links to that in the show note of this episode. So if you guys don't know where the show notes are, just scroll down, and it's the notes under the show. That's the show notes. I put links in there to make this easy for you freaking scallywags that can't navigate this computer land. So those will be in there. Just click them and go. Reach out to Stacie. Let her know that you love her, or let her know that you don't love her. Let her know what you thought about this conversation, because and same with us here at 37 Project. And if you'd like to hear more conversations like this, then we will do the work on our end to make that happen. We love you guys. Thanks for tuning in. Nuff said.